Hey everybody, this is going to be a video reply to a thread that Adam Nicholls started back in October. And Adam, I'm sorry, I don't think I was subscribed to you at the time, but I'm certainly subscribed to you now. Had I known that your thread was going on sooner, I would have made this video much sooner. But I'm glad that I found out about it. Some people in my regular subscription thread, people like Matthew Smith and Alex, Mr. Dylan Records, I saw their video responses, and that's how I knew that this was going on. So I'm glad you've extended this till the end of the year. This is going to be, I'm sure, a two-part video because I only have 8 minutes time capacity here. So I'm going to have to make this in 2 videos. I hope you'll watch the second one if you're interested in from the first. You know, I like these threads when people ask questions and you get to like give your opinions and how you feel about each subject. So really enjoy that. So okay, let's see where we're going to start here. You asked some questions, 9 of them. I'm going to do your last question first. It said show all the copies of With the Beatles and the Beatles White Album that you have. So I'm going to start with the White Album. I should mention that I do have the CD box set of the Mono Masters that came out a few years ago, but I couldn't get to it. It's buried somewhere where it's too difficult, so I'm not going to show that. But for the White Album, I do have the 2009 remasters here, you know, that came out. And I was watching Matthew Smith's video, and he said something. He doesn't really like CDs as much as vinyl, and I agree. But these are good for playing in the car, which is what I do. You know, I like to have CDs for playing in the car while I'm driving. Right now, I have only 2 copies of the White Album on vinyl. This one, which I'm pretty sure is an original or close to it. I mean, it's got the number there in the corner, serial number. And I'm really always trying to find really clean copies. It's hard to find a clean copy of the White Album. This one's not too shabby considered. I did have to do a little scrubbing and cleaning here on my own to get it, so but it's in pretty good shape. I have another copy of the White Album on vinyl. This is probably a later pressing. There's no serial number. It has the Beatles embossed on it. Also pretty clean. You know, back in the later 70s, I'm going to say around 1977, I bought a lot of the Japanese vinyl albums, which were excellent. And I know Gary, Sun Dodger 1, is always going on about those. But as all of you know, I'm sure by now, at some point I sold off all my original Beatles collection, and I had a lot of those Obi strip Japanese albums, which are worth a lot of money now, probably over $100. You're lucky to get one for $100. But I had the White Album mono vinyl, which is really cool, and you know, it also had the strip, and it's funny, my memory is that those albums, you could go to TSS department store and they had a great import section, and you could buy them for maybe $15 to $19 a piece, which was not a little bit of money back then, but is really a steal now, I guess. Well, that was then, this is now. Anyway, on to With the Beatles. Same thing, I have the mono CD somewhere, but here's the CD of the 2009 stereo remaster. And I have a few vinyl copies here. I have this one in mono, which is not in great condition if you look close enough at it, but I think it's an original because on the back it's written from, looks like from Dave and Colleen, Christmas 1963. Somebody wrote that on there, and I keep it that way. It feels kind of vintage that way, you know. So I have that. Also have a stereo copy on vinyl. I'm very big on this album, as you know, Adam. You even said it in one of your videos. I'll get into that eventually. Here's a Canadian pressing. It's not original, it's a reissue. Beatlemania with the Beatles. And one of the reasons why I love this album so much is because of that word, Beatlemania. To me, this really encapsulates the early period of Beatlemania in England. Here's a German copy I have of With the Beatles on the Odeon label. It's got the green strip there. And I thought I'd show this, which I got recently. It's a bootleg called Outtakes with the Beatles, and this has a lot of working versions of a lot of the songs from the album. Okay, so that takes care of that. Now on to some of the questions. First question was, when did I first hear the White Album? Well, as near as I can remember, in 1976 was when I was really getting to be a real Beatles collector. You know, I'd always liked the Beatles when I was younger, but in 1976 I was 14 years old, and I really was getting into like the hobby of collecting. And I remember there was a compilation album that a lot of you will know called The Beatles Rock and Roll Music that came out in '76, and that was an album that kind of spotlighted the harder edge Beatles songs and rocker songs. So I remember that was probably my first exposure really to hearing White Album songs. Up to that point, I only cared and focused mostly on the early Beatles. When I say early Beatles, I mean up to the Help album. Rubber Soul and beyond I hadn't really delved into much yet. So it's hard to believe now, but back in 1977, let's say, I was 15, and something like the Beatles' White Album seemed really hard-edged. You know, I would listen to that Beatles Rock and Roll Music compilation, and there were some White Album songs on there, songs like Birthday, Back in the USSR, and especially Helter Skelter, which really sounded like something heavy metal, you know, really outrageously powerful. And it was like, wow, you know, if you bought the White Album, you were buying like a real like heavy metal Led Zeppelin type of album, of what I thought. That's how I thought of the White Album. And I'd say the first time I heard it, as near as I could guess, was probably playing it on vinyl in my room, 1977-ish. I was 15-ish, you know, could have been 76 and 14, but around there, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great album. I was amazed by it. It was unlike anything that the Beatles had ever done before then, and probably since then. It was just the one time where they were able to really like just have all kinds of odds and ends and unusual tracks and all kinds of flavors for one collection together presented like that. I thought it was so unique in that regard. I loved it. Which leads me to the next question. You asked, well, one of the next questions, I'll go a little out of order. Another question you asked was, is the White Album your favorite album? Why or why not? Well, it's not my favorite album. You know, it's hard to say about favorites, as I think Matthew Smith said, you know, or somebody said. That might have been Alex, Mr. Dylan Records. Sorry. Ask me on one day and it'll be one album, it'll be my favorite. Ask me on another day, it'll be another. But I don't think at any time when I'm asked, I put the White Album as my favorite album, meaning #1. But it is the album that I would recommend to a lot of people. If you're a newbie and you never heard the Beatles before, I always tend to recommend Revolver, Abbey Road, and the White Album, because I don't want to get a lot of younger people kind of turned off to more sappy Beatles with Please Please Me or something. So no, the White Album's not my favorite album, but it's a great album. I love it, absolutely love it. But I can see why it's a lot of fans' favorite. All right, well, I'm going to go on to part 2. 8 minutes went fast. Check it out.